Hey, Husker fans, welcome to another episode of the Husker Big Red podcast with Chris Peterson and Danny Gillette. As always, go Big Red. Good morning, Husker fans, and welcome to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peterson, and joining me as always is Danny Gillette, and we're back with another episode here of the podcast on Monday. And Danny, how you doing this morning, man?
Good. My Bruins weren't able to pull it out on Friday, but other than that, saw some family this weekend, saw some friends yesterday. So it was a good weekend trying to escape the rain here. It's very dreary right now as we speak, but other than that, I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Doing pretty well. Made it through another weekend, so another busy week ahead, but not a super busy week, I guess, for the Huskers, or super busy weekend, I should say. But we've got some news, so we're going to cover that. We're going to talk some Adrien Martinez, some recruiting stuff. The Big Ten baseball tournament's coming up this weekend, so we'll touch on all those topics. Before we do that, if you haven't, please do us the favor of hitting the subscribe button, hit the like button, get into the comment section, and help others find our content. And we are a channel and a website for hardcore Husker fans, man. So if you're a fan of the Huskers, hit the subscribe button. And anyway, if you're a fan of the Huskers, maybe you've been following Adrien Martinez. So we're going to start our show there because, like I said, it's a bit of a slow weekend, and it's been fun to watch Adrien Martinez just killing it with the Birmingham Stallions. They won again on Saturday. He had 5 touchdowns. He had one play where he did look like a Patrick Mahomes it was like a 2-point conversion, I think, or maybe a touchdown, but he rolled way back, like 20 yards and threw it into the back of the end zone. So, he did make some incredible plays during his time with Nebraska, but he just wasn't, very consistent. But it sounds like, he feels confident about the future. He's hopeful he'll get another chance at the NFL. And if he keeps playing like this, I don't know why somebody wouldn't at least give him an opportunity to come in and compete for a backup job. He's definitely shown that he's worth another opportunity, or worthy of another opportunity in the NFL.
Yeah, he's shown that he's this was the type of quarterback that Nebraska wanted when they recruited him, and it just speaks to how bad Mario Verduzco did as a quarterbacks coach. He was terrible. And, that combined with the fact that this roster, when he was here, wasn't built properly. Now I was a huge Adrien Martinez critic. I thought it was time to move on from him. And, I still think, he came up short in several situations. But at the same time, it just really kind of highlighted the, ineptitude of the staff when Martinez was at Nebraska, and I'm happy for him. I'm happy he's getting a chance to kind of showcase his skill set, because I think this was the quarterback that, Nebraska recruited and they thought that they were seeing, and through a myriad of factors, both in terms of things that Martinez could control and things he couldn't control, it just didn't work out. So now I'm happy to see him excelling and playing at a high level.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch him. Hopefully, he keeps doing it, and maybe that, like I said, that'll get him an opportunity, in the NFL after this. I think that's a big reason why a lot of these guys are playing, in this spring league, is to try to keep their, careers afloat. And of course, you wish that he had been that player at Nebraska, but with injuries and other different things, and it just never happened. And definitely, I think some of the blame falls with him, but there's plenty of blame to go around on the coaching staff too, and it just didn't work out, and that was unfortunate. But hopefully, we don't see the same thing, history repeating itself in the future with our other, young phenom quarterbacks. So we'll see how that goes with Dylan Raiola.
I don't think we will. First off, the offensive line, coaching is a lot better. There's a lot more weapons put around Raiola, and I feel like there's a confident head coaching staff, and that makes a world of difference. And I don't think this is going to be Scott Frost 2.0 this year. I think it's gonna turn around and be successful. And having a quarterback's coach who knows what he's doing, and Glenn Thomas also, I think, will make a huge difference. We've seen it make a difference on the recruiting trail, and we even saw it in the spring game a little bit, where they improved throwing motion of Heinrich Harburg. The strong play of Raiola and the strong play of Daniel Kalen. I think, there has to be something said for the job that Glenn Thomas has done so far, both, on and off the field.
Yeah, he's doing a nice job on the recruiting trail and bringing along, these young quarterbacks. So hopefully, we'll see that production on the field this season. In terms of recruiting wise, there's a little bit of news, not a whole lot. But Nebraska is, trying to flip Emmanuel Carmo from Minnesota. He's a 3-star linebacker in the composite rankings. So he's going to be taking a visit. Wisconsin's going to host him, and then Ohio State. So, just certainly Nebraska trying to add to the 2025 class there with Carmo, who's they're trying to flip from Minnesota.
Yeah, and I believe he was a 4-star in one set of rankings. Not that the rankings matter terribly, but he's a good player. He had 48 tackles, 10 tackles for a loss, I believe, last year. 2 sacks and an interception that he took back for a touchdown, and he also played a little bit of offense as well. He had 15 receptions for 294 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he did play a little bit of offense, but I think Nebraska would look at him as a defensive player. He can play off the edge. He can play, kind of that pass rusher type of, style. And I think he would be a great get and would fit into Tony White's defense tremendously.
Yeah, so I was wrong. He is a 4-star, 341 in the composite rankings. He's 6'2", 222. So he would be a jack in the Nebraska system, in my opinion. That's where he would fit in best.
And he would fit in well, honestly, I think.
But Ohio State, if Ohio State pushes for him, they're going to get him. I mean, flat out. Nebraska, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Ohio State, those are the visits. If Ohio State wants him, they'll get him, so that's how I feel about it. So we'll see how it goes. But if it's a true Nebraska Ohio State battle, like Nebraska's not going to win that. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough, but never say never with this coaching staff. I mean, I might be drinking the Kool-Aid, but they always seem to do their due diligence in a recruitment, and they always seem to try to put their best foot forward in a recruitment. So, I mean, we'll see. I think it will be tough, but he would be a nice get. So,
it's just you look at Ohio State and they get almost all of the top recruits if they want to get them. So I mean, we'll see. Nebraska definitely could have an opportunity, but I mean, I can't think of they obviously they won the Raiola and the Carter Nelson recruitments, but outside of players that like to have ties to the state of Nebraska, like they just haven't beaten anybody like in Ohio State for a kid yet. So we'll see if that happens. It's the same with Michael Terry, who visited Oregon this weekend. They still have to, I know people are like, oh, it's not as big a deal, but what is a big deal is that Oregon has the Nike money. So like their NIL offer is going to blow Nebraska's out of the water. Like there's no question about that. Just because Nebraska paid Dylan Raiola, like they ain't paying guys, everybody like that. Like Nebraska NIL is not in that stratosphere. So I mean, when you're talking about competing against Ohio State and Oregon, I still think that's a factor you need to think about, because like Oregon will pay everybody because they don't care, because they have Phil Knight's money. So that's why those teams always worry me, because not only are they have the elite pedigree, but they're paying more than anybody. I mean, like there's nobody in the SEC that's even paying more than Oregon and Ohio State. Like in terms of NIL money, like they're right there with Miami, and they actually have like elite programs. They're not just like trying to put out a dumpster fire like the Hurricanes have been trying to do for the last decade.
Yeah. And I mean, it should be no surprise if, Terry goes to Oregon or whatever. I mean, we shouldn't be worried about him going to Oregon, because quite honestly, he should. We're not there. We're not there yet. You know what I mean? We don't have the winning pedigree that a lot of these programs have, and we don't have the Nike money. So I would not be shocked at all if he went to Oregon. I would love to have him at Nebraska, but it's no surprise if he ends up at Oregon or one of the other, programs.
And, I'm not trying to be overly pessimistic. I've just seen a lot of times where Oregon or Ohio State gets involved, and all of a sudden they take over the lead. I've seen that so many times with Oregon. And that's because they're, like Michigan was recruiting against them for a quarterback, and all of a sudden, like his parents had, jobs at Nike. So it's like, oh, I wonder why he picked there, So, I mean, that's just how things kind of go. But I did read the Michael Terry interview with some of the stuff, and he was talking about the offense, yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, I don't think that Oregon took the lead, but they are always a team that kind of worries me, and that Texas A&M and Texas are out there too. So it's just some kids, NIL matters more than others. I don't know how much it matters to Michael Terry, but he's ranked like 27th overall. So you're not going to get a player like that without some sort of NIL plan, and the base salary thing, isn't going to work. Like those guys cost a lot of money, and Nebraska might be in the position to pay that. I'm not sure, but I know with Dylan Raiola, it seems like I think that was kind of a unique situation where Matt Rule was like, hey, he came out and was like, we need this much money for a quarterback. Whether I think he meant the transfer portal, more than high school recruiting, but then Raiola came up, and then I think that money that they were going to use to get like a Kyle McCord or somebody else, then they kind of pushed towards Dylan. So I mean, they do have NIL money for sure. I'm not saying that they can't be competitive in that field, but I just always worry about, like if you're offered 500,000 to go to Nebraska and $1 million to go to Oregon, like what's your decision going to be? And
Oregon. Yeah.
So, I mean, we'll see though. I do think Nebraska's in a good spot with Michael Terry, but Oregon just always freaks me out for kids because, and not only that, they do have amazing facilities. I know everybody loves the Nebraska facilities, but Oregon's facilities were like, have been as good, and all the amenities that they have too for players. Like it's pretty wild what they, if you've ever done like a video tour of the Oregon facilities, like there's definitely
insane.
No worry about cost there. I guess we'll just say that. But Nebraska is building something special though, and Oregon, they do have some talented quarterbacks on their roster, some younger guys besides Dylan Gabriel, but I don't know that they have a Dylan Raiola. So I mean, we'll see how it all works out. But
it'd be hard to say no to Oregon. It would be hard for me to say no to Oregon if I had to choose between Oregon and Nebraska. But we'll see. Like you said, we'll see how it all shakes out. I think it's going to be an interesting recruitment, and I think it's going to go to the highest bidder, and we'll see what Nebraska can do. I mean, Nebraska surprised us before, so maybe they surprise us here.
Yeah, and like I said, it always just depends with how much different teams, like Ohio State sometimes with these, 4 stars that are in the 300s, like sometimes they'll not really be that interested. So that's why I said, like, if Ohio State's pushing for, that person at the top of their board, they're at a point where they can routinely turn away guys that are ranked like 300. Like they turned away Donovan Edwards for Michigan, basically, because they pretty much were like, we have Ladarius Henderson and, there's like another running back that they want in the class. So they pretty much told him like in June, and mind you, this guy's like ranked in the top 40. I mean, he was like basically a 5-star recruit. They're like, hey, you either commit right now in June or we're just going to move on, and that to me, that's crazy that they have so much talent to choose from, like, because that was like Michigan's #1 player on their board outside of McCarthy, JJ McCarthy in that class. So they would have waited until hell froze over for Donovan Edwards to make an announcement, and they did. They waited until signing day, where Ohio State's it ended up being a bad decision because he took 2 80-yard touchdowns against them in the game. But still, I mean, those are the kinds of decisions that, like, Ohio State just walked away from a commitment from a top 100 cornerback because, he decommitted.
I saw that over the weekend, yeah.
He decommitted, but I mean, essentially because they have so many good cornerbacks. I think that's the big, where it's like, when's the last time Nebraska landed a top 100 cornerback? I can't remember. They have had Coleman, this is a top 100 guy, Carter Nelson, Dylan Raiola, Grant Brick. So they've landed four top 100 kids under Matt Rule, which is pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive. But
especially considering we went 5-7 last year.
Yeah, well, especially more because if you look at another important thing where Nebraska is going to start trending up, I think is there was this chart I saw that was talking about like expected, NFL draft picks, outside of recruiting rankings, that type of thing, and that's one. Michigan, in terms of recruiting rankings compared to draft picks, was like the best. They had the most draft picks, essentially compared to like the worst kind of recruiting. Compared to like Georgia and stuff like that. They recruited a way lower level. And that's where I expect Nebraska to be right where Michigan is within a couple of years, because they're going to recruit these kids. They're going to get some top 100 kids, but Matt Rule is going to take kids that are 3 stars and low ranked 4 stars, and he's going to develop them into NFL players. And we're going to start seeing Nebraska have, 6, 8, 10 players drafted in a single draft. That's what I believe is going to happen in the future. It's going to take a few years to get there. But under Scott Frost, so right now Nebraska's like at the bottom part of that list because they're still kind of dealing with the Frost era of things of, guys that, were recruited really highly and then didn't pan out. Some of those guys have
Frost was able to put guys in the NFL somehow. I mean,
recruiting wasn't terrible at recruiting. It was just the development.
Yeah. No, he got some 4 stars from Florida. He had Fedoni, obviously. I mean, looking back on it now, he wasn't the worst recruiter. You would think that, like, judging by his work ethic, he would be like one of the worst recruiters in the entire country, but he really wasn't. I don't know what exactly he sold to recruits and what his recruiting pitch was, given how everything looked on the field and how unorganized he appeared to be, but somehow it worked.
And some guys are still coming along. Bryce Bennert's made a big step. Turner Corcoran, Teddy Prohashko, all guys that Scott Frost recruited. I mean, Isaac Gifford, Ty Robinson, Nash Hutchmaker. I mean, there is a lot of this roster that key parts of this roster that were recruited, by Scott Frost. So it's interesting to see how it all works out. But you got to get it done on the field, and he just could not. He couldn't get the results on the field where they needed to be. But Matt Rule, I think, will do that. So that's kind of the recruiting buzz. And the other thing I wanted to wrap up with, Carter Nelson, won I believe it was the long jump state championship. He took third in the 200 meters, but I think his jump was like a foot longer than anybody else. So, I mean, kid's just an athletic freak. I think he had the second. I want to say he didn't get the all-state record, though. I think that went to Rowdy Bauer, the guy that's walking on for the Huskers. Yep. So that shows you, I mean, even with some of these walk-on guys, like Matt Ginatoni, Vince, yeah. I don't know where I got Matt from. Vince Ginatoni. I mean, just incredible, numbers athletically. And in Nebraska, some of these walk-on guys have that too. And Carter Nelson, man, this guy is one of the most athletic players in the country. Quinn Clark, just won a divisional title in some jumping events. So I'm actually going to be watching Quinn Clark this week. I'm going to be covering the state Class AA track meet in Montana, so he's going to be there. Matt Ludwig might be there, so maybe I'll see if he's around, try to talk to him too. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, watch Quinn Clark and watch some of these other athletes. But I do like how Nebraska really does invest in those track numbers. I think that is something that Matt Rule is, and they're not the only ones, but prioritizing athletes and betting on athletes, I think is a smart way to go, especially if you can coach the game like Matt Rule can.
Yeah, and I think it's always worth to find certain traits that you want, and for this coaching staff, it's speed, and it's the ability to kind of make plays in open space, and they haven't really deviated from that style. It's not a hodgepodge mix of wide receivers with different skill sets per se. All of them have some semblance of speed and ability again to make plays down the field, make plays after the catch, and so they've stuck to a style that's worked. They've gotten quarterbacks that fit the style of the receivers, and they've done a good job overall of establishing an offense that's complementary at each position with the other one.
And, it's interesting, too, before we kind of move on, I want to touch on baseball, but Matt Rule did do an interview on Sirius XM, and he was talking about the whole walk-on thing. We've talked about that on a couple of our shows, but he said that getting rid of the walk-on would be awful for college football, and he said it would be really, really sad. And I agree with him. Now, you have to remember, too, Matt Rule was a former walk-on. He was a walk-on linebacker at Penn State. So, to be honest, if walk-ons didn't exist, like, he might not even be at where he's at right now. You know what I'm saying? Because, he played college football, yada, yada, got his foot in the door, eventually became a graduate assistant coach, worked his way up. What if he had to go play for some D3 program, and he what if that was his fate? I'm not saying he wouldn't have still been a coach, or maybe but maybe he's a D2 coach someday. I mean, so all those little opportunities matter. And, I'm not saying maybe there shouldn't be some sort of limit, or maybe they could make walk-ons like the practice squad or something. I don't know, but it seems like I just don't want to get, those guys to get robbed of that opportunity. Like Isaac Gifford, man, like he's probably going to get drafted next year. And that's not to say somebody couldn't go and play at a JUCO or an FCS school or whatever, and then transfer up. I mean, we've seen that, and that probably would happen. But I do think that, it would be sad, and it would be a bad thing for college football, especially Nebraska, if they got rid of the walk-ons.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens there. It's very interesting. The entire landscape of college football is changing, and unfortunately, some tough decisions are going to have to be made. But like I've said before, it's about the coaches who adjust with all these changes, and the ones that are going to survive. So we'll have to see. I'm hoping the walk-on program, doesn't get eliminated, but time will tell.
So speaking of some tough decisions, I think Will Bolt's going to have some interesting decisions to make with his pitching staff this week, looking ahead to the Big Ten tournament. So Nebraska did lose to Michigan State on Sunday, and that gave Illinois the Big Ten championship. I'm not even sure if they won there. I didn't really care. I didn't watch it, but at any rate, Nebraska is the number 2 seed, and so the Big Ten tournament is interesting because, like in softball, everybody makes it, but baseball they cut it down to 8 teams. So you have to be fairly good to make it. And Omaha's hosting it for the second year in a row, I believe. Let me double check here. Yep.
It is Omaha. Yep.
So Nebraska's going to be starting on Tuesday. Actually, it's when we're getting this rolling. And Nebraska's going to be playing Ohio State at 2 p.m. Central Time. So it's really basically because you only really get 3 baseball games in. It's a little longer than softball. So the first game is going to be at 10 between Indiana and Purdue. Then you got Nebraska, Ohio State, Illinois, and Penn State will be the last game on Tuesday. And then Wednesday morning will be Michigan and Iowa as the other 8 teams. So basically, if you win, the key is you got to win your first 2 games, essentially. If you win your first 2 games, then you're in that undefeated semifinal, essentially, and you've got 2 chances to get to the championship game. So I guess where it's going to be interesting and where it also differs from softball is, like if you had Jordy Ball, like Nebraska should have had this year if she wouldn't have been hurt. I mean, you can throw her out there for game 1, 2, 3, and 4. I mean, as long as she, for the most part, I mean, there's some, I guess fatigue factors. I mean, softball pitchers will take a break, but for the most part, they can just ride on through. And baseball, you obviously can't do that. And Brett Sears has been amazing this year, but when do you use his start? Do you do that, game 1? Do you wait for game 3? So that's going to be a really interesting decision for Will Bolt, is how he kind of organizes his pitching staff for this week.
I personally wait until game 3 because you don't want to lose, but you got to factor in maybe if you start off slowly and you need that dominant pitcher to at least, give you some life. And it's kind of like a game 7 pitcher, in my opinion. Ordinarily you start your best pitcher for game 7, or you plan it out that way. So me personally, I would start Sears game 3. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think I would. I think I'd go, McConaughey, and I'm not sure if that's how he pronounces his name, is spelled that way, and then Brockett, and then probably Sears. But however it works out, I do think that Nebraska, I don't think they have to win this tournament to make the NCAA tournament. Although, I mean, the Big Ten has gotten some, the short end of the stick a few times. But like I said, based on the D1, baseball projections, unless they're super wrong, because Nebraska was a 2 seed in the region with the number 10 seed overall, which was Oklahoma, and that was before this weekend. So I'm sure it'll get updated, but they won 2 out of 3 games at Michigan State. So I don't think that could hurt their, I don't think that's necessarily going to help their resume, but I don't see that hurting them, winning a weekend series on the road. So I feel pretty good about their chances, but I mean, the tournament's in Omaha, and you can never scoff or pass at a chance to win a Big Ten championship. And it would be great if they could win the Big Ten tournament title. Because I mean, look, even if they make the tournament, they're probably not going to win the NCAA tournament or anything. It's kind of like the women's basketball team. I felt like they could win the Big Ten championship, and then of course they lost the lead. But this is a tournament I think Nebraska can win if the pitching, if the pitching staff can put it together, especially the bullpen. They really need to address the bullpen going into next.
Well, they got used a lot on Sunday.
Yeah, I know.
Because they had 7 pitchers.
I swear it was every time I turned. So I was going back and forth between things, and I turn it there, and then they would be back in it, and then Michigan State's offense would just explode again.
Yeah,
so
they had 7 pitchers. You utilized from the bullpen. Brockett did not have a good day at all yesterday, but that happens. You just wonder about the arm fatigue of the bullpen heading into the tournament a little bit.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all kind of shakes out. And but yeah, it's nice to have it in Omaha. Last year they got to the round right before the championship, I think, right? I'm trying to think back of but last year they really needed to win the tournament to make it. This year I think they're in a better position. I mean, they did lose a lot of games, those midweek games, which hurts, to Creighton and Kansas State and yada yada. But they got some nice wins early in the season. And looking throughout Big Ten play, I think they only lost 1 or 2 series. I mean, they were pretty good over the course of the season. The Big Ten usually only gets maybe 2 or 3 teams in, but I feel like Nebraska, even if they go like 2 in a barbecue, I still feel like they got a pretty good chance of making it. But don't go 2 in a barbecue though. Let's not test my
Yeah,
theory out.
no.
If
Yeah,
anybody doesn't know, that's you lose 2 games and then you got your, it's the whole thing we used to say in high school because you have the family, you have like the team barbecue. So, you double elimination tournament. So 2 losses and you get your barbecue, which you don't want. That's not a good thing. Although
but
barbecue is a good. I'm always there for a good barbecue, but it'll pick you up, make you feel better about your season being over. So I guess that part's okay.
yeah, but ideally you do not want a barbecue. And
you want the end of season championship barbecue,
the banquet,
Yeah,
not the
you want the
barbecue.
Yeah, exactly. You want the banquet, not you want the banquet with some barbecue.
Yep, exactly.
That's the dream. So,
So
yeah.
we'll have to see what happens this week. It's going to be a lot of interesting, how they use the entire, pitching staff. How, what's the bullpen going to look like? Who do you start for that third game? I mean, there's going to be a lot of interesting decisions made this week, and so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens over the course of the next couple of days.
And that's one thing I like about the college baseball season is how short it is. Just I like that the games kind of matter a little bit more. It's Major League Baseball can be a long season, although I don't hate it, but it'll be fun to get down to it with the college season here, and then we'll be essentially track and field will wrap up, so we'll be done with the 2023-2024 sports year, and we'll be on to 2024-25, which will be the Nebraska football season, which is less than about 4 months away now, 3 months, 3.5 months.
It's May 20th. May flew. So it's May 20th, August 31st is the opener. We're getting close.